Hi, this is part 2 of Disabled VE Pro templates. Part 1 was a brief introduction to show you how shiny and lovely it is. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty of how you actually do it. And I'm going to start by just showing you a few details of how it works, and then we'll really get into it after that. The magic button, which I'm aware I didn't tell you how it was working. You know what? It's not really magic. What it is that my keyboard here, which is a Swissonic Control Key 88. Yes, I have finally moved on from my M Audio that I've sworn at for years, and this is certainly better. It's got loads of buttons and switches I never use. It's got pressure pads, and I just set the pressure pads up to be to actually play very high notes on the keyboard, and so it comes into Cubase playing a very high note, and in a MIDI, where is it? MIDI inserts here. I've got a few transformers. Is it this one? Yeah. And this transforms that high note G8 into a controller. It's kind of weird. That makes it look, I know it's not. It's sending out CC19. I've since discovered that that's more elaborate than I needed to do, that I could actually have set up my keyboard sending CC19 just direct from there, and that's the remote control that in VE Pro enables the instrument. Here's the bad news. I'm going to show you later, but in VE Pro, that's got to be set up for every single instrument manually. There's no shortcuts. You can't copy and paste these settings to all. It's quick to set up in Cubase, although I'll talk you through a couple of problems I've had with that as well. But that's the broad principle. And it does mean with a note, it means that at least, I'm not worrying about recording CCs. It's a nice plain note that I'm recording here if I need to put it on the timeline. This business here. So if I double click this, yeah, there it is, right up the top there. That's my MIDI enable, and if I drop down one, it's MIDI disable. So that's how that works. You use rack instruments in Cubase. Not track instruments. I'll be explaining why in the third video, but if you don't want to know why, that's very simple. It's just use the rack instruments. If you click this here, activate outputs. This shows all the outputs I'm using in this particular instance of VE Pro. And that's the last one I've been working on, so there's some blanks at the bottom. And as I get new things, I just add to it. That's a nice thing about the template, is that you just add to it, save it, and on you go. All the existing stuff carries on working. You just add, and it's not a big drama to be loading older projects, in theory. And while I remember, if you click up here in Cubase, show VST quick controls for one slot only. That's what means that you just highlight with the one thing, and it jumps around as you jump around, and you can see exactly what you're working with. I quite like that. It's just a nice, if you do need to track anything down in VE Pro, it's pretty quick to find your way around. So that's how you do that. So that's the overview of what the big end picture is. But I thought what would be useful, rather than trying to now deconstruct this massive template with about, 800 instruments or something, rather than unpick that, I'd show you it as you'll do it, probably, which is to start from a completely blank project and show you how you just do your first few instruments. Once you've got the first few done, the rest are a whole lot easier. And so there will now be an edit as the screen magically vanishes. Boom, there it is, completely blank. So in fact, I would normally I would put groups in, I would put effects in and all that kind of stuff. But we're all really worried about here at this point is how to get this whole VE Pro thing working. So the first thing you do is in Cubase, let's go to VSL, Vienna Ensemble Pro, there. Look at that, there's little 3 dots next to it. That means it's the VST3 plugin. That's important, because if you use VST2, you're very limited on the number of certainly inputs you can have, and I think output. So let's open that. Do you want to create a MIDI track? Is that yes, please, create. And we will look at what that is. So that's added one MIDI track and has one output at the moment, and we're just going to go through it slowly in turn. Here in the rack is our instance. We could call this anything we want by double clicking it. Instance 1. There we are. Here's the MIDI track. Nothing going on. It's not routed anywhere. So let's now zip over to VE Pro. Here's VE Pro, which is also totally blank. I've now pressed the plus button and it started a new instance. And we're going to call this instance 1 as well. Okay. There's nothing happening in it at the moment. So if I go insert plugin, let's do the inevitable. Let's go to contact 5. There we are. We have an instrument. Now, by default, this comes up here as 1 and 1. MIDI port 1, MIDI channel 1, MIDI port. I knew it had a real name. MIDI port. I always call it a pipeline for some reason. So, as I said, I've got this set up to have 8 MIDI ports in here. Now, you can change that in the settings, I think. You can have general. Where is it? Oh, here we are. MIDI ports 8. So you can have more. I've got 80 mono outputs, which is 40 stereo pairs. I actually did a test up to 500, and it got a bit sluggish in Cubase. So I'd say maybe 128. That might be a number a lot of people use, or 64 I've had. I needed a bit more than 64. And so that's that many outputs. MIDI ports 8 times by 16 MIDI channels. That's what, 130 or so? 130 MIDI channels. And so that's more MIDI channels than audio channels. And it's because if I've got lots of strings, different articulations, I only really want them on one fader. And so you kind of sub things down in VE Pro, but I'll show you a bit about that as we go. That's just buried away in the settings, and you can set them up however you like. I'm just showing you how I've got mine set up. So MIDI port 1, right, okay, we'll see how that works in Cubase in a minute. MIDI channel 1. Now, I'll tell you ahead of time, a lot of people get stuck here, is that's fine, but it will only work on channel 1. So when you add more MIDI channels, none of these extra ones will work. You actually need to change that to all, and then it will receive all, whatever I send at it from Cubase, it will work in here. So let's, short notes. Oh, I often think long notes. I don't like long notes, I like short notes. I never use long notes in anything I do. It's not my thing. So we've got some brass here on channel 1. Let's put some strings on channel 2. That'll probably do. Okay? Just for our tests here. And so we want them to come out of different faders. So at the moment, if I show you in contact, outputs. Here we are. I've got this set up. I won't go into this in this video. You can set up how many audio outputs and how many auxes you use. I won't worry about auxes for the moment. I might talk about that a bit more later. But for now, let's have the brass coming out of fader 1, and we'll have the strings coming out of fader 2. Okay? So that's that. Now we'll come back to him in a moment, because we just want to set up Vienna Ensemble, Cubase in the same way. So at the moment we've got one MIDI channel. Let's look here. Instance 1 MIDI in 1. Okay, that's good. That sounds right, doesn't it? And so all we want to do really, if we go add track MIDI, this is how to add lots more quickly. We will call this instance 1 channel 2. And actually let's create 15 more while we're here. So that, that's what you would be doing, because I'm just using 2, but in reality you would create a nice lot more. Add track. Here's a nice thing. All the rest of them are now neatly labelled as to what they're going to. You'll probably want to change that as you go. Like number 1, I'm going to want to change that to brass. Number 2, I'm going to change it to strings. But it shows you where you are, and it's quite a neat way around. Now, if I press 1, oh dear, nothing's happening. The reason why nothing's happening is that we have to go back here to the rack. Click that. It's not connected. So you don't. It's not enough just to create a VE Pro instance. You have to connect it to something in VE Pro. So let me just do this thing. I'm going to put half a window of this on so you can see. You can't. Well, you can if I press this, can't you? Right. Okay. What am I looking at now? So we've got half of Vienna Ensemble Pro. This instance at the top, that's what we're looking at. I want you to look at that, which is greyed out. It means it's not connected. It's a little plug. It means it's not connected. Let's go back here. Let's press connect. It's now going to search for all the instances. There's only one instance, and it's called instance 1. Click connect. Now our plug has turned to a much more satisfying solid colour. And now, hurrah, we're in business. It's working. Don't really need to see that anymore. We can get rid of that. Now, just to go through the whole route of what it's doing. Brass, channel 1, going to instance 1, MIDI in 1, bring VE Pro back. That is instance 1, port 1. It's going into channel 1. We've got it all working. Most of the time, nothing works first time, and you have to go through this step by step as to why something isn't working. But it's good. We're all good there. Channel 1, output 1 goes there. Back it comes to the output, which is here of 1, 2. Brilliant. Well, we're in business now, and the strings will just work on channel 2. Okay, it won't work, will it? And the reason why is this, if you remember, we changed this output to number 2. Output 2 isn't going anywhere. To do that, press the master bus button up here in VE Pro. Are you keeping up? Are you taking notes? Here's our contact 1, and it's fed by, the input is here. Of course it does that, doesn't it? The input here, if I right click, plugins, didn't show you that, does it? Channel input. Oh, that's it. That's how you do it. Channel input 1. So I always forget how that works. The input is fed by the channel contact 1, and you see it says 5. I'm pointing at it. That's really useful. 5 and 1. That means contact 5. That's the name of the plugin, but 1 means the first output. So we've got the first output on our little desk here. We haven't got our second output. But if I just click this plus button, you see that now, it's much clearer. It's the first one because it's got the plugin hosted. It's a bit confusing. That now says contact 5. It's the first instance of it, but it's channel 2. And now, if I play my strings and make it so you can see, that's great. It's now working. We're coming out of the second output. But look at this here. They're both routed to the same place, which is the master bus. The master bus is coming out of his outputs 1 and 2. I'm going to change that, because if we go output 1 and 2 here, that will still be the same for the brass. Set to 1 and 2. But here's the important bit. This one I need to change now to be outputs 3 and 4. So, first channel coming in here comes output to 1 and 2. Second channel coming in, outputs to 3 and 4. Now, if I press strings, it will have vanished, because I've only got output 1 and 2 here. So to add the other outputs, you go here, activate outputs. Here's all the possible outputs. I can just click all outputs and it will do it at one hit. A little power tip here is that now in Cubase 10, if I just click that one, and let's say I know I'm going to want to use that many, I'm shift clicking to the number I need, and now I just click that, and it will create all those in one hit. I think that's new in Cubase 10. And here now down here we have all those outputs. So now finally, if I press strings, it's coming up 3 and 4. So I can name this brass, and name this strings. Now here's another bitter experience tip. It can be slightly, once you start building this to hundreds and hundreds of tracks, it can be difficult to find your way around. I found it quite handy to write down brass here in the little notepad. I've got a little notepad. This is instance 1, outputs 1 and 2. And so I can just click at any point in my track when I've got hundreds of tracks and go, what was this again? There is another way of seeing it, but I just quite like doing it here so you can see where you are. And likewise here, instance 1, output 3 and 4. I don't want it to clutter up my workflow here, and because I used to write them all here and it was very, very cluttered. And you can just keep it out of the way so it's there if you need it. The nice thing is now, though, that I've enabled these brass and strings, you could skip that step because it's a bit cumbersome. Because if I now go over here, activate outputs, they're nicely labelled now, and it tells me what they really are and my pet name for it as well. So that's how to navigate your way around this labyrinthine control. One other tip while I'm thinking about it, this brass patch here in Symphobia, go back here, brass, that's got a bunch of key switches. Now, if I'm working all the time in Cubase, I don't want to be thinking about what's what here. And so what I often do is I also, in my notepad here, I start writing down F5 is staccato, F sharp 5 is whatever that was. Oh, staccato, extra short, and staccato. Extra, can't type, short. F5. Anyway, you get the idea. And so again, I don't have to be back and forthing the whole time between VE Pro. You want to be as fast as possible when you're composing. So where was that again? In fact, normally I standardise these so they're all broadly in the same place. I've got a little Korg nano key on my keyboard here, and that's just set up to hit key switches in the lowest octave of the keyboard, right down below the normal 88 notes. And I try and standardise as much as I can, with staccato's always on one note and legato's always on one note and tremolo's always on one note. And that works for most libraries. And then sometimes when they get too big, you do something different. And that's where I write stuff down. So it's just an organisational tip. Okay. All we've done so far is pretty much the basics of what working in VE Pro is. And so sorry if you've had to skip through stuff. This is now where we get to the automation side of it. I'll show you how I set this up, because that's how my keyboard is. Well, what should I do? So let's start in VE Pro. VE Pro here. Now we get to the horror. Let's get rid of that. Outputs there. Now we get to the horror of it all. So we need to go to View, Automation Mapping, or just show you here. Enable Disable Channel. So that's the thing here. That will disable it right here, which is great. And now it's taken it out of memory, but we don't want to be back and forthing. We need to remote control this operation. So we'll enable it again. Yep, there it goes. It is there if I click it again. So it's all back in action. View, Automation Mapping. This screen, it might look innocent now. It won't look innocent by the time you finish with it. It's a horror show. Add. Select source, select destination. It's all quite logical. It's all quite good German logic, but it is cumbersome. Select source, MIDI controllers. Right. This is your MIDI input. Now remember, we were on number 1. We were on channel 1 for this. And I've set mine up to be controller CC19. I just picked that because it didn't seem to be used by much, and I wanted it to be, out of the way. You could pick any one you like. There's no magic there. Just do a bit of homework. Make sure you're not picking CC1 or something that's used by loads of stuff. And there's hidden stuff in the MIDI spec. So go to the MIDI spec, find a blank one. If you want one for free, try 19. It's worked for me. So there you go. Channel 1 control at 19. So let's just go through that quickly again. We're in MIDI port 1, channel 1 for the instrument, and we're telling it that we want is when it sees CC19 on that channel, we want it to do something. Okay? Select destination. Now what do we want it to do? Well, here's our channels that we've used so far. Contact 5.1. That's the one. That is the channel that Contact is hosted in. You might want to change that. So K5 first instance. I'm not sure if it updates it straight away, so this might be even confusing you more. Yeah, it hasn't. It's still 5.1. For some reason, it takes a few minutes to update it here, but that if you did that as you were going, that would say Contact 5 first instance. Disable. That's it. It says disable, and that means enable disable. So that's set up the automation for that channel. So now, let's move that and that out of the way. We're back in our world here. Now my magic button here is set to just play this key. And so what I've done is as I showed you at the beginning, I think, didn't I, MIDI inserts. If I add the MIDI transformer here, and as a preset, I've got somewhere pad 1 enable. So I've done it. You can just hold it there and see the logic. I say this really doesn't help that this bit is not showing you really what's going on. But to briefly go through it, when the pitch is equal to G8, which is what my pad is, that's G right off the top of the keyboard, type Set to fixed value controller. We're into computer programming territory now, but once you've got it once, you can copy it. You can save it as a preset like I've done. Value 1, set to fixed value. This is the bit that I hate. It says G-1. It doesn't mean G-1. It means 19. If I put in the number 19, it changes to G-1. But it's I think it's a bug, really. It should show 19, but it does work. Pretend that says set to fixed value 19, value 2 set to fixed value 0. That means that it's a 0 velocity event, I think, which is apparently what I found works. So now, let's see if the magic works. If I now put this over here, I've got my MIDI transformer here. Let's see that again. Oh, I can't see that and this at the same time. I've got to press that again. Can't see them both at the same time. You can't see all the magic at once. Take that as read. Let's see now if this works. The moment of truth here. When I press my pad set to G8, nothing happens. I'm glad you saw that, because that's how your day will go. For some reason, I've done something stupid. And what is it? What have I forgotten to do? G8, that's all right. That's there. Oh, do you know what? I've done the most stupid thing in the world. What I've done is that I've just shown you the enable button. It's already enabled. Now I've got to show you the disable button, because that's what we're doing. Welcome to my day of doing loads of really stupid things. So a second thing here says pad 9, disable. That is F#8. It's set to the same controller, and that's a note on event 127. So this bit's the same, except it's note on and note off. Why is that even a different note? I can't remember why I set it up like that. Don't argue with me. I found this works. Right, those values. And so now, hopefully, if I press... Oh, no, let's just see it in action. Now I'm going to press the other pad that is disable, and... Hey! I hope you're cheering with me. We've made it work. If I press the one I pressed last time, enable, which is my top left pad, press it, and now it's loading. Bing! It has actually loaded. You can't see it until you actually press that. Welcome to my world. So that's the basics. And then don't forget, that's only the very first channel. This one doesn't do anything because we haven't told it. So we have to go back into here. We have to go into our view automation mapping. View automation mapping. It's off the screen. Here we are. Add another one here. MIDI. Oh, it's 1. Now we're on channel 2, but we're still on CC19. This one. Now it's just, I'll tell you to rename it in the end. Bear with me, and it normally works out in the end. Disable. Here, I've also got to do the same thing. In the mixer, you can copy these across to save yourself a bit of time. But for now, I won't drag the mixer across. Enable this one. Another transformer. It's disable. And it will basically be controlling, although it's channel 2, it's still controlling the same contact instance because I've got them both hosted in the same contact instance. Does that make sense? Here we go. So let's press disable again, and it's gone. Enable, and it's back. That's where you know it's loaded. Press the button. There it is. Okay, so that's the meat and potatoes of it. You can pick your own way of doing this whole business of using notes rather than controllers. If you can set your controller to something else, you might use an iPad, a lemur, or whatever it is. Well, however you want to do that, you've got to find whatever way works for you of remote controlling that operation. And that's it. Repeat ad infinitum. What I would do, in point of fact, is that by default, Cubase creates all of its outputs in a subfolder called VST Instruments, Instance 1 for Cubase, and there it is. I will want, let's say, add track, a folder track, and I want to call this Symphobia Shorts. I wouldn't really set my things up like this, but I'm just showing you shorts. I'd have those two coming into that track there. Those are my MIDI tracks. I would then go add track, do another folder track. I would do it more efficiently than this. I'm just showing you. And I would say Symphobia Shorts Audio. Okay? And I would put that, it's just an awkward way you have to do it. That is now a subfolder of that. And here's the important bit, drag these up. You can drag these around anywhere. There's no magic to it. This is where you start seeing, that's why I wanted to write down here, because you start separating everything out and you will start getting lost if you don't make a few notes along the way. All these are cluttering up the screen, aren't they? So now, if I've got my file, I'll give it a nice colour. I do like, well, let's, whatever, red. I've got some custom colours in the other one. However you want to do it. That's really ugly, isn't it? But there we are now, and I will make those all nice and small. I've managed to click that so it wasn't in. There we are. And now it's starting to look a little bit like my full template, isn't it? That's just how I set things up. You do whatever the hell you want. But that's what works for me. And then, crucially, I will now drag the mixer across. What I would then be starting to do is starting to route... crumbs. Because this is a completely blank template. It doesn't have all my normal things in it. Sends. Where's the flipping sends here then? Insert. I would route that to a group. I would group that to strings group, to a grass, to a brass group, or sends. There we go. And I would start setting that up. You can do. There's a new clever way of doing this. If let me show you this. This is quite nice. My sends here. If I wanted to send, these are instruments. I don't want the instruments. I want VST effects. Let's say I want to send them to my reverbs, which are where? Here. Just a basic thing there. I drag it there, and it's set up for me. A reverb send. I'll just pick that as an example. And so on and so forth. That's how you set up your template. You get everything so it sounds nice. That will sound swampy and horrible, probably. Yeah, whatever. And so you do all your spatialization. You get everything sounding exactly as you want it. Then at the end of the process, when you've got all that, then you press the magic disable button and you move on to the next one. Phew. Well, that's sort of the bones of it, really. And you just keep on repeating it. And believe me, this thing here, this automation window, this grows and grows and grows and grows, and it's absolutely enormous. And it's so easy to make mistakes. And so here's my philosophy. It's pain and gain, that I would rather have all the pain in downtime, like today. If it wasn't downtime, I wouldn't be talking to you. But it's downtime, and so I can start fiddling around and setting things up. Do that in downtime, and all this horror of one by one adding the next parameter, and then you go there. Now it says channel 3 now, and I know it's so boring. But rather do it now, because when you're in use, you never even think about it. It's just bang. You want it to work. When I'm composing, I want as little attrition as possible. I just want every millisecond I'm waiting, I resent. So it's bad enough that I have to wait for instruments to load, but it's a couple of seconds. It might give me time to think about what notes I actually want to play. I can contain that, but I don't want to be faffing around with routing. I don't want to be wondering why things aren't working. So you do all this in your downtime. I think I showed you that. You just, for the next instrument, you add another one, VSL. As you build it up, and you just arrange things, drag things, don't be scared, drag things around as you need them, add automation. If you saw, by the way, I had a third transformer on everything. This is a me thing. I hate CC7, and I find with automation it's very easy to write CC7 and muck up all your settings. And so here, not MIDI monitor, I don't want MIDI monitor, I want transformer. I've just set up a very simple no CC7 script If it's 7, it sends it to a dummy controller that nothing uses, 1119. There's probably a more elegant way of doing that. But that, if you saw there was 3 transformers, what are they? Oh, that's what I was going to tell you very quickly. What have I done with the mixer? Studio, mix console. Just to be aware, you can drag this. It's great. You can drag that to there. And then all my transformers are ready to go. In fact, you can do it even better. You can go copy, first channel selected settings. So this is one way, at least in Cubase, you can speed things up. Highlight there, right click, paste settings to selected channels. Boom, all my MIDIs are good to go. So that bit is quick. Except I found another bug in Cubase that I would find that those wouldn't pass any MIDI. And I couldn't work out why. And all I had to do was this, drop it down to another slot and back again, and it would suddenly pass MIDI again. It's a bug, what can I say? But yeah, I'll be talking a lot more about Cubase bugs in the next video. I just had to go up and down and do this. You may find in your version it's not producing that, but if you're going, why isn't it working? It's all routed correctly. Just try that, and it might work for you. Right, that's quite enough of all that, isn't it? That's how to set it up. Now, this is very much optional, but if you're thinking, really, do I want to bother with all that? This horrible automation window that you keep telling me is an absolute nightmare? Really? Is this really the best way? That's the doorbell. I've got to go. Meet you in part 3 if you want to know why.